Everyone. The regular meeting of the CRRMA Authority is now in session at 9:04 on June 8th. Mr. Tejas, any public comment? Thank you. Item number 3, adoption of minutes for the CRRMA board meeting of May 11th, 2016. I assume everyone's had a chance to review the minutes.
Second.
Okay, so
Madam Chair, I would mention there is one minor correction. On page 1, there is a word that says it's written as there, T-H-E-R-E, and it should be the, where it says the following board member was absent. So with that minor correction, I would ask for approval.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 3 is passed. This morning we have Representative Joe Pickett joining us, and he is here to share some information with us. But in light of on the Cesar Chavez, I'd like to ask the board to consider moving item number 9B to the front, so we can have Mr. Tejas present, and then Mr. Pickett will then have comments.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Tejas.
Thank you. Raymond Tejas, Executive Director of the Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority. I thought what I would do for you today is just update the board in terms of where the Regional Mobility Authority stands along with TxDOT in the ongoing discussion about the potential removal of tolls from the Cesar Chavez Express toll lanes. So as you may recall, I'm going to go through a couple of dates just very briefly, just to set the stage. Back in December of 2015, the RMA board took action through a motion to direct staff to begin discussions and to set up a meeting with TxDOT to discuss the potential removal of tolls for Cesar Chavez. By January, we had sent a letter to TxDOT requesting a meeting with them. In February, TxDOT returned a letter, and we began discussions at that point. A meeting was held between RMA staff and TxDOT staff, and specifically, and this was March 1st of 2016, it was myself, Brian Cassidy from Lock Lord, one of our outside attorneys, and also Greg Blake, who is a program manager for our general engineering consultant team. So the three of us went in. We met with several TxDOT folks, including folks from finance, specifically a gentleman by the name of Ben Asher, who is, as I understand it, has been tasked with this project from TxDOT. So Mr. Asher was there. Several folks from finance, and one of their attorneys was there as well. A very productive meeting. We started from the very beginning, talked about how the project came to be, some of the project history, the various project agreements that are in place, and all of a lot of the details that would have to be ironed out if we were able to find a solution for this particular item. So again, very productive meeting. At the conclusion of that meeting, we agreed to identify additional potential options in terms of how we could achieve the removal of tolls, and said we would get back once each party had looked at some of those options. So I've spoken with Mr. Asher a couple of times since then, and in fact we're looking forward to scheduling a second meeting here pretty soon. The TxDOT has been focused on one particular option, which includes the idea that the debt, and as you'll recall from the board motion here at the RMA, one of the concerns was whatever solution there is, it has to have a way for the RMA to have no debt. Obviously, the RMA is an unfunded agency. We have very minimal resources, so we couldn't absorb the debt that was incurred based on the Cesar Chavez operation and maintenance structure. So one of the charges from the RMA board was figure out how to resolve it without remaining debt for the RMA. So one of the options or I should say the option that TxDOT has been focused on to date is the idea that the debt that has been created to date would shift over to the Border West Expressway. So and that requires a little bit of explanation or reminder, really. Border West Expressway, the way that deal was structured is that the RMA owns a percentage of that project. So say in 2020, if Border West Expressway generates $1, the RMA's percentage ownership of that project determines how much of that dollar comes to the RMA. So say, for example, it's 80%, so the RMA would generate that 80 cents and TxDOT would generate 20 cents. And that's the way that the Border West Expressway was structured. So the proposal that TxDOT is looking at is a reduction in the ownership interest that the RMA would have in Border West Expressway based on the amount of debt that we would shift from Cesar Chavez over to Border West Expressway. So again, that's the option that TxDOT is looking at. The RMA in turn has proposed the original solution, which we discussed here at the board, which was TxDOT simply forgiving the debt, whatever amount that is. So we're looking at that one and some other potential options as well. So anyway, so that's in very general terms, that's where we are. My last conversation with Mr. Asher was yesterday. I told him that I would put together a final kind of a email bullet point list of the options being tossed around by the RMA staff. We would share that with TxDOT, and then we would sit down with our options and with TxDOT's options and kind of take it from there. So in a nutshell, that's where we are today.
Thank you, Mr. Tess. Any questions or comments?
So I take it you already have our options?
Myself, the GEC staff, Locklord, we're looking at several options. I can tell you, if you're interested, we can talk a little bit about those. The first one, obviously, is the one that the board was most interested in when we discussed this back in December, and that is TxDOT simply forgiving the debt. That was, I think, the preferred approach at that time. So we're still pushing for that one. We'd like TxDOT to evaluate that and see if that one is still available to us. Another potential option was raised by TxDOT during our meeting, which was some other entity comes forward and pays that debt on behalf of the RMA. Obviously, this one, and listen, I'm talking about options, right? Not saying that we're recommending any of these, but these are simply options that I think we need to evaluate and identify whether they're feasible or not. This one maybe not so much, but another entity could come in and step into the shoes of the RMA to repay that debt. Potentially placing the tolls on hold during the period where the traffic and revenue study identifies a deficit between revenues generated and operations and maintenance expenses. So we could put the tolls on hold until it flips to the black, and then restart tolls at that time. So those are some of the options that we're looking at. And then, of course, TxDOT's option as well, if we were to shift the RMA's debt over to a reduction in ownership interest for Border West.
That begs two additional questions, if I may.
Certainly.
Chair. Okay, so what is our percentage ownership in the Border West project?
So that shifts, and it will continue to shift until the final completion of the project. And the reason I say that is, as of today, the RMA's involvement in Border West Expressway is the $500 million grant, right? So the way that you determine the percentage ownership is how much is the total project at the end of the day. So TxDOT is responsible for everything above $500 million. So if it's $600 million, then their percentage ownership would be the prorated share of that $100 million contribution. As of right now, I understand it's about $130 million. So that puts us around 82% ownership, if I remember correctly. But again, that will shift depending on the final amount of contribution TxDOT puts into the project.
So moving the $5 million, say $5 million, just for conversation, doesn't really dilute tremendously our ownership in that project.
Not necessarily, right. And that's part of the evaluation I think that TxDOT is going through, and they're looking at also. Remember, part of this deal has to include the shifting of long-term operations and maintenance over to TxDOT. So they're evaluating what that cost would be to them, and we have to evaluate what the loss of ownership interest would be as well. So we're looking at all of that as well. And in fact, one of the takeaways from our meeting and our ongoing discussions is to figure out how much, or really reconcile the amount of funds that we've pulled down on Chavez to identify whether it truly is $5 million, because the $5 million came from a figure that was put into a TxDOT letter to Representative Pickett. I've never really been able to reconcile that $5 million figure, so I think it's actually less than that. So, okay. Yes, so a long way of answering your question.
That's yes. All right. And then my other question is on the second option you discussed, another entity taking the debt, like who?
Don't know. That was proposed by TxDOT. I think ultimately their approach was not forgiveness. So it was anything but forgiveness. So I think it was thrown out on the table, so we need to look at it.
Okay.
I don't know who that could be, frankly. I don't
Okay.
know who would agree to that.
Thank you. Mr.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Yes. Mr. Tez, when do you think this evaluation will be completed and can be brought back to the board or?
Well, I'm hoping to meet with Mr. Asher again the week after next, hopefully, is what we were kind of starting to talk about. So I assume, I mean, like I say, TxDOT is focused on that one option, so it may be a very short meeting. So I'll have a briefing for you all, hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, very good. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. Representative Pickett, thank you for being here this morning. We welcome you.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Joe Pickett. I really think it's pretty simple. It's whether or not there is a desire to remove the toll. That's it. On the other end, we can remove it. We're ready to remove it. The state's ready to remove it. You heard some of the options. The one that TxDOT has, I won't say recommend, but during the working meetings has suggested is pretty easy to do, shifting it to Border Highway West. And the reason that makes even more sense now is that project has got some issues, and TxDOT is searching diligently now to come up with extra dollars. It's not necessarily a secret. There's been no press conference, but it's already somewhere about $30 million over budget. So TxDOT's coming up with the difference because, as you heard mentioned, 500 was a grant. It's all coming from the same pocket, by the way. We're not putting anything in here, but if it's 30 million or 35 million, it's going to be a small change in the percentage ownership on that, and ultimately maybe we can get that reduced in the future. I'll be meeting with Mr. Asher next week as well on a statewide initiative on what we're doing here. San Antonio actually beat us to the punch, and San Antonio is actually the first community that's rolled back a toll based on Prop 1 and Prop 7. TxDOT also has a commitment that working on as well. This actually saves them money, costs them money. Let me try to explain. I don't know if Mr. Tejas has told you, you're also getting annual gifts for the next several years to help continue on the operation and maintenance, and those go for quite some time. So on one hand, TxDOT looks at that as we're no longer going to have to advance additional dollars, and they'll take over the maintenance on the road, which they should be doing anyway. What I'm seeking and what we need to do is make a request. We can continue having additional meetings, but until the board just says to TxDOT, we would like the toll to be removed, and this is how we'd like it to be removed, and get a formal request back. Because right now, again, I believe that it's pretty easy if the board was to request that the debt, and I again agree with Raymond on those numbers, and we'll reconcile what the amounts are, because there was some money for studies that shouldn't be a part of that, for other things, and I've looked at the numbers myself, but whatever the number is, they're willing, they meaning the staff, is willing to recommend to the commission, I've talked to the commissioners, if that were the case, moving it to Border Highway West, reduce that percent of ownership, which again in the grander scheme, it doesn't matter what the total amount is. Right now it's $630 million. If we said it's 635, and it may be 640, it may be 650, because we still don't know where this is going to wind up with some of the issues that are going on Border Highway West. And so the more TxDOT puts in above that 500 million, changes that percentage. And again, when I was here last year at the end of the year, there wasn't a $30 million shortfall. Today there is. So they're having to put another 30 million in, which means they get a larger percent, CRRMA gets a smaller percent. So to sum up, I'm just hoping that the board will pick one. And frankly, I know which one I believe TxDOT could move pretty quick on and get it before the the commission, if that's not the choice of the RMA, and the RMA feels like, no, we'll only do this if they'll just forgive it, make that request. I just need something to work on that's a formal request coming from the Regional Mobility Authority with the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Pickett. Well, I think, and we can have this discussion with the board, is that I think it's important for us and prudent for the board to also look at the evaluation and really look at the impact of doing away with the tolls. One way or the other, I think we need to understand the impact before we move forward and make that decision, whatever that request will be. And I think we still need to get some more information from Raymond, from Mr. Tejas, on that evaluation, because I'm not comfortable with just saying let's ask for this without really looking at and evaluating the impact, because it's more than just.
And I've asked TxDOT to update as far as the driving numbers, and I've said some critical things statewide, and I'm going to continue on that frame. When I say critical, one of my projects that the speakers put me on, and part of a bill that passed last session, is to look at TxDOT reversing the state-operated tolls. We're going to make headway. I can't say today that the number that we're eventually going to come up with at the end of this year and recommend to the legislature will be funded, but we will have a plan. There will be a plan in place, and that's the way the state is going. That's the way the leadership is going. That's the way all the legislation has been drafted. Since 2013, Prop 1, Prop 7, we're limiting all the new dollars, and September 1st of next year will be the largest cash flow increase that TxDOT's ever seen in the history of the agency. Begins September 1st with a caveat: no tolls. And we're going to start pulling those back. So that's what we need to do. That's where the state's going. And things have changed. This is not the way it was in 2010, in 1999, and 2003 when we started borrowing money. We have a revenue source that's increasing from both of those propositions going heretofore. And TxDOT should be responsible for that. And as far as the driving public, you've seen the numbers, and we're going to update those. I'd be surprised if it's gone up tremendously, but only 6% of all the traffic on Cesar Chavez uses the toll. 6%. 94% are still using the 2 free lanes. And is that going to change? Sure. As soon as people are just so congested that they're finally going to get pushed over onto that, and there will be some more people doing it, but it's still not going to be the driver's choice, and it's not helping congestion. And in the long term, TxDOT does have the ability in these agreements. Once we start working on Interstate 10, after all of this work is done, TxDOT has the right to suspend the tolls, and the plan is to suspend the tolls, not just on Cesar Chavez, but Border Highway, indefinitely while all that construction goes on. And that will be something that TxDOT will do. So my request here today is just, if this is something that you think is good for the community, not the RMA, not me personally, the community, does the community benefit from removing the toll of Cesar Chavez? Then make a request of some sort so that we can work on it and actually get it done.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Representative Pickett?
And thank you for moving the item up, Madam Chair.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it.
It's not the busiest day of my life, but thank you. Normally it's every 10 minutes, but today's a good day, but thank you for doing that anyway.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate it. All right.
Shall we? Madam Chair, I'd suggest that as a show of our confidence in our area, that we as a board take the stand that we do want to remove the tolls, subject to an acceptable solution being developed by Mr. Tejas in his discussions with TxDOT.
Well, I would ask you to consider us looking at it before we make that decision, because the whole toll road decision was made as a part of a system. And I think for us as a board to really be prudent, we ought to look at that before. And we may end up, without any tolls, but I think I don't think we have enough information to do that, because the original idea and design was to be part of the system. We knew early on, just from projections, that we were not going to have the numbers. We knew that because it was brand new. It was the first little toll road in El Paso. So I would ask that we either maybe refer that to a committee. We could take it to an executive committee and have Raymond present to that committee, and we discuss those options, and then come back with a recommendation to the board, because I think there's a lot more information that we need to put on the table.
Well, and that's why I said it's conditional, that it must be an acceptable solution to this board. What you're saying would modify that. But should he not come back with an acceptable solution that is acceptable to this board, then we would not do it.
Well, would you consider just having an executive committee, which would be, the officers, have a discussion and have a meeting where Mr. Tejas presents, and we really have we're not really prepared today to have that discussion, to really present the information that we need to really make that decision.
May I make a comment, Madam Chair?
Yes.
Look, I'm going to reiterate, I've been involved in transportation projects in this community for 25 years, and I have a long memory, and I can tell you that I understand where you're coming from on the plan, but I guess I'm not going to pull my punches. This project was forced down our throats at a time when you paid to play. You either had a toll project or you were not going to receive funding from TxDOT. Am I incorrect, Mr. Pickett, in my assumption? So El Paso, like many other communities, had to find something to toll. And I can tell you that the toll viability indexes, is that the proper term, Mr. Pickett, that was used? El Paso didn't even have anything vaguely resembling projects for San Antonio, Austin, Houston, and Dallas, but we had to participate because that was the attitude of the state and TxDOT at the time. These are different times. If you stand back and look at the data that has been given to us, it really makes no economic sense, and I don't know when it ever will. Now, the Border West toll project is completely separate from this, because that is planned and it will have heavy traffic right away. All you need to do today is to drive Interstate 10 from about 2:30 to about 6:30 to feel the pain. Okay? And if what Mr. Pickett is saying is correct, that TxDOT has the right to come in and suspend the tolls during construction of I-10, then, why are we going through this exercise? Because it's, am I right, Mr. Pickett? We're looking at 10 years plus to rebuild Interstate 10 on the conservative side?
Well, I'll let Mr. Tejas answer part of that because has the intimate details of the contract. I don't think it'll take 10 years, but it'll be quite some time. And, I have been trying to pull my punches. It's difficult sometimes knowing. I wish everybody knew what I knew. And that's not arrogance. It means being in a room. It means being there, being part of a statewide initiative on creating revenues, and knowing that any other community would jump at a chance to be in the position this CRRMA is in. If I could list 10 of them, that would just be like, what? TxDOT's ready to remove a toll? What does that mean for a community? It's a lot. Even in North Texas and in Houston, the toll fatigue that we're seeing in North Texas is unbelievable. There will be no less than 15 bills filed this session on removing tolls, slowing tolls in North Texas. It's just a different time. And we are in control of our destiny more than we ever have. And if we want to have this discussion publicly and get more people here to join in, I'd be more than happy to do it. I'd love to debate this in detail because it hasn't been done in this community. I hear about it every day in my position as the chairman of transportation for the Texas House of Representatives. I hear it every day from every community I go to. And it's all connected here. And what's happened in El Paso is actually a travesty. When I first got elected in 1995, there's this court of inquiry. We're going to sue Texas. We're going to sue TxDOT for not giving us our fair share. That was BS. We should be suing right now for what has happened to this community, what's been done to this community over the last 6 or 8 years. That's a travesty. And we have an opportunity to remove it. And even if Border Highway opens with a lot of traffic, is that right to do when it's not necessary? It couldn't have been done without the $500 million grant. Because of that, it's hurting other projects. Because of other things, it's hurting other projects. Because when I go to the commission and it's like, well, you guys have been getting free money without a plan, without priorities. And we've passed laws to stop that from happening statewide. What's happened over the last couple of years can't happen in the rest of the state of Texas because we've passed laws to prevent it. That's how bad it's gotten. Billions of dollars have been wasted and spent without priorities around the state of Texas, and that had stopped. We started it in 2013. We finished it last session. And those things under the current situation would be very difficult to repeat. But we're now the benefactors, and that's a, oxymoron right there, of those past issues. And Mr. Wardy, you're absolutely right. You were there the same time I was when we were told, you either do this or we cut your funding. And we still had a choice at that time. But there's only about 4 of us, about a handful of 4 people that fought it. The rest of them thought, gosh, let's just give in. Let's just do it. So I'm trying to unravel that, but you have to look at the bigger picture. It's not like there isn't monies there. It's not like we're not entitled to it. It's not like things haven't changed now in the future. We're going deeper and deeper in debt. We started in 2003, I'm sorry. We now have $17 billion in debt that TxDOT started borrowing. We've stopped that. We've stopped the debt. We've increased the revenues. The revenues will increase by $5 billion a year. In an agency that's about $11 billion a year, their revenues are going to increase by $5 billion 2017, 2019. So it's changed. It's different. We should be bellying up to the bar saying, where is our fair share now? Where is our fair share? We want the monies for non-toll projects. We want you to take care of it. If the board ultimately says, fine, we're not going to do this, and then we ask for forgiveness of the loan, let me work on that. That's fine with me. I just need something to work on. But what's the overall plan for El Paso? Is it to have a system? I guarantee in Central Texas, they're going to be pushing back by next year. Their system there has gotten to the point where you can't stop it, and that's the plan. The plan is to build a system to where it cannot be stopped, where it's too big to fail, as the bank situation 2008. Too big. So I hope that's not where we're going in El Paso. But as far as 10 years, Mr. Wardy, I don't think it'll be 10 years to reconstruct I-10 through El Paso, but it's going to take longer than 18 or 36 months. And that's us, by the way. We're the ones that use Interstate 10, and I think you've heard me say this before. If you do traffic counts at New Mexico and Texas, and you do traffic counts at Hudspeth and El Paso County, those numbers are about 1/3 or 1/4 of the traffic that's actually in our community. That is us, and we need to make sure that we fix that. It's not people going through Interstate 10. It's us that benefits when we do all that.
Thank you.
I'd be glad to visit with anybody individually, one at a time, post an executive committee meeting where actually we can sit there and show numbers. I'll bring Mr. Bass. I'll bring the chairman of the commission again. I'll bring whoever you want to at those meetings and sit down and show numbers, work on things, just short of whatever it takes. But again, the Regional Mobility Authority in El Paso has used their authority in so many other good projects. The first project that this body had was Spur 601. That's not a toll. And that was a good project. And TxDOT turned it over to the RMA. TxDOT works with the RMA. I've changed legislation trying to loosen some of the stuff. Everybody knows I'm not a big fan of RMAs, but they're here, and I think we should use what abilities they have when it makes sense. And you've got some good projects that make sense. This one doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, let's see.
You should be on.
I'll ask a question, Representative Pickett. What is the timeline for making this decision? I think we don't have a regularly scheduled meeting in July, so are we kicking the can down the road too far? Do we really need to act?
I would prefer that we have a specific recommendation as soon as possible, and if that's the next meeting, my recommendation will be the next meeting. It's not that there is a drop dead or deadline date. I'm working on things, trying to put together a package for the legislature next January. I also know that currently the leadership at TxDOT is very aware of this and has really just kind of been in wait. You know, the action this board took was last year, and that takes a while to meet, and understand that. And Mr. Taylor said they're going to meet again. I understand that. It's not really necessary. You could put a executive committee together, Madam Chair, and hash out a few things and make a recommendation to this body and then take action, whatever that is. Anything that we do sooner is better than later. One of the arguments, as I said, was you guys are ready for another payment coming September 1st, Mr. Tejas? Is that the next?
It's actually, I think it's coming August 15th, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
It's very soon.
August 15th, and it's
I'm sorry, you're right, September 1st. I'm on the wrong project.
and it's how much?
Well, so it depends, right? We get to drive that. And so we have enough reserves, we probably won't be pulling this time.
But it's up to as much as could be another $200,000. Somewhere between, could be up to that much.
More than that, in fact.
So you're going to add more to your debt pretty soon here too, and that is debt that doesn't go away. Your deal with TxDOT right now, and Cesar Chavez, is you got to pay that money back now. That's your deal, and you're going to keep adding to your debt. I know you have some minuscule tolls coming in, but you're adding to that debt every single year, whatever that number is. So, you know, I don't think that's a big number in the overall scheme, but again, the timing is right. When the rest of the state of Texas starts lining up, and they're already in the queue, and we're the last ones in the queue, because I said San Antonio took advantage of this way before we could get our community to do it. As soon as I passed Proposition 7, San Antonio immediately on passage of Proposition 7, removed the tolls out of their transportation improvement plan in Bexar County. I mean, it was immediate. And they went to the commission agreed. And that meant TxDOT had to come up with other sources of money. They're basing it in 2 phases, but it's coming from Proposition 7. So make a request. The one that I believe TxDOT will take in an instant is one, you already have the debt, we're just saying move the debt, which you may never ever pay under the current situation with this percentage of ownership. That's one way to do it.
Mr. Taylor, we have a regular scheduled meeting in July, is that?
We do. And historically, there have been months within the summer where we've canceled a meeting. That may be what you're referring to. But we do have a planned meeting for the second Wednesday of July.
Okay. And Madam Chair, I use this all the time. I tell people my dad used to always tell me when I was a child, all prayers are answered. Just sometimes it's no. I would just like to see this body take a definitive position by July. It's, yes, we agree that there shouldn't be tolls in an area that doesn't make sense or deserve them, or no, we want to grow the system. I would like to know so I can plan my events going forward. Because if El Paso's not going to take advantage of some of this stuff, there's other communities out there, legislation pending that will help them. I just need to know. And again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And again, I'll extend that invite to anybody personally. If you want to contact me and just sit down and talk about whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be tolls. It's anything. I mean, you have somebody that, believe it or not, my mom's not here to say, "Go, Joe," behind me. You have somebody who's, I mean, I'm one half of a team in the Senate. And Senator Nichols and I have passed stuff that nobody ever thought could be done. You know, we waited for some changes to happen in certain places, and the legislature itself was tough. I mean, it was we almost didn't do it. It took 3 special sessions, and on my side, it took me 8 separate attempts to get 100 votes. 8 separate attempts over 3 special sessions, and it wasn't until August 2013 that we finally got something out to the public. And once it got to the public, they ate it up. They said, "This is what we want." So last session, we came back with an edict from the public. We've taken even a bigger step, and we're not done. We still have some, what I consider low-hanging fruit. There's some sacred cows out there. But I've also been appointed by the Speaker to another committee, a separate committee, that is a select committee on transportation finance. We're still going. We're looking for a third bite at the apple. It won't be a constitutional amendment, in my mind. I don't think we can do that. I don't think the public, after 2 huge successes, is ready to say, "What have you been doing for the last 4 years after we gave you all this authority?" So I don't believe it'll be a constitutional amendment, but we're still going to have proposals for the next session on debt reduction and revenue increases. And the debt reduction should be something that we're all a part of. Because if we reduce $1, that's another $1 for transportation. Out of that $11 billion taxed out budget, $1.3 billion comes off the top to pay for debt. That doesn't go for maintenance, doesn't go for right-of-way acquisition, doesn't go for construction. It goes to pay the debt. We start reducing that debt, that's another $1 to do all those other things. So debt reduction is probably going to be my focus in the next legislative session. How do we reduce that debt quicker? I'm sorry I gave you a lot more than you wanted, and we can go till 2 or 3 this afternoon, but I'd rather not. So, Madam Chair, again, I offer my services, what little I know. If you have an executive committee meeting, I would love to attend. If you have a working meeting, anything that I can do to help. I know that this is a tough subject for some people. I know, you get suggestions from outside, and we're going one way from years ago, and all of a sudden this guy wants to change course. No, I've always been on the same course. When we go back to how this was set up, I was there doing the negotiation. And the reason we have a possibility is the negotiation was left outside of the commission. When we finally did down to the nitty-gritty, the authority was given to the executive director of TxDOT. I was on those signs. So at that time is why your agreement is the only one like it in the state of Texas. It's the only one that has a provision. If there's not a certain revenue stream in 15 years, it reverts. I've said that before. It reverts to a non-total road. Just the fact that's in there is something that's not in any agreement anywhere in the state of Texas. Why is it in there? Because at the time, having a handful of 3 or 4 people fighting this huge war, at least I got some stuff in there that when things changed, we have the opportunity to go back and say no. Because the money for Cesar Chavez was a grant too. What if you had to live off the tolls? What if the state of Texas, by legislation, which will be proposed, by the way, anywhere that TxDOT granted money for tolls, managed lanes, is going to have to pay that debt. I'm not saying it's going to pass, but there will be legislation filed by other communities who want that money back. There are people out there working diligently right now that are upset that tax, gas dollars, and Fund 6 money was used. Their money was used to pay for the toll in El Paso. Their money. You don't have to use those revenues for debt service on the money that was used to build Cesar Chavez. You don't have to use the revenues for debt service on money for Border Highway West. And the state of Texas is footing that bill, and some people aren't happy about that. There are people that want to change that, if you have a toll project, then it needs to live off of those revenues, or your community finds a way, because we gave you the money. Again, I'm not saying it'll pass. I would personally have to fight that because of being from El Paso, but will it be discussed? Will it be on the plate? Will somebody put that out there? Yes, it'll be out there. And we're not the only ones. There's a few other bad toll projects in the state of Texas where just to say you have a toll, put it on the books. I mean, we even enforce a toll in Lubbock, Texas, and Amarillo. We've removed those. And San Antonio, the second largest city in Texas, has 0 tolls right now. 0. Did the soapbox, did I get high enough on that soapbox? Should I get off of it right now? Thank you for your time. It's a good thing it's not 5 o'clock at night. It'd be worse. Madam Chair, I thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you, Representative Pickett. Yes, do you want to, Mr. Parker, do you want to make any other comments?
No.
Okay, Mr. Warren.
Are we going to establish an executive committee to study this?
We certainly can. It's up to the board.
I think we need to take action of some sort on this because it is an important matter in our area. So I think as a show of good faith by this board, I think we ought to take action now to proceed in some manner. Our staff is doing so. I think this board needs to do so as well.
How do we do that in the form of a motion?
So the board has, just for the record, in December... Sorry. I think that is on. There we go. In December, this board did take action doing, I think, essentially what you're asking, which was directing staff to begin with discussions with TxDOT subject to those caveats that we all discussed back in December. So I think the board has expressed that, but you're certainly, this has been posted under discussion and action item, so if you're interested in reaffirming that statement from December, you could certainly do that through a motion, if that's what you're looking for. And I will commit to meeting with Mr. Asher the week of, I believe it's June 20th, and try to move through that process as quickly as we can, and bring something back to you in July.
Mr. Warden.
I have the same concern that Mr. Niemann does. I have patience to some, but continuing to kick the can down the road becomes an exercise. And I think, Madam Chair, and I know there's different opinions here, if we were to formalize a motion, as stated by Mr. Parker, and if there's not an acceptable solution to the board who makes the final decision, then we don't. But
could I just address that, though? I don't want anyone to think that we're kicking the can or we're not doing the work.
No, we are.
Process.
Not you, Mr. Kayes. You've been very diligent in your efforts, so please don't take my comments.
Well, but I would say, the board provided direction in December, so I don't mean to be argumentative. I just mean to say that the board has expressed, I think, what Mr. Parker is mentioning today. I think you've already done that. But again, you're certainly welcome to do it again through a reaffirmation of the prior motion or even a stronger motion as well. Know that I will continue from the staff side to move as quickly as we can.
I agree. I mean, it's just been a process. We had to meet with TxDOT, which Mr. Tejas did, but we did determine in December the route that we were going to take. So if you agree with that, Mr. Parker, we can...
My only recommendation with the existing proposal that we have is maybe just put a timeline, which is what you're saying, July meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'll just chime in, Madam Chair, if I may. This has been framed as two alternatives, forgiving debt or shifting debt, but of course there can be a combination or something in between. And it might be, if it were backed up with some kind of analysis as to why this makes sense, well, there won't be tolls during this period, or I'm not sure how that might be done, but that might make a stronger proposal going to TxDOT. And I do wonder if having an executive committee meeting with Mr. Tejas ahead of that July meeting might be the best way to go, just to frame an option, or come up with a recommendation.
Is that possible for you to convene, like the executive committee, and we can work through that and then come back with a recommendation to the board in July?
Yes, so I think what we could do is if I can schedule something with Mr. Asher the week of June 20th, then I could schedule an executive committee meeting the following week, and then I think that still gets us before the July board meeting. We could do that if that's...
Okay. Does that make sense, or is that... Do we need that in a motion?
It's up to you. I mean, I'll do that either way, but if you'd like a statement from the board, you can put that in the form of a motion.
Let's put it in the form of a motion that we establish, we ask the executive committee to meet with our staff following the June 20th meeting with Mr. Asher. If we could do it quickly thereafter, it would be beneficial, I think.
Our next meeting is July 13th, Mr. Terrace, is that correct?
The second Wednesday, if that's the second
Wednesday. Okay, so July 13th. So that should give us enough time to meet, and we would have had, Mr. Chase would have had discussion with TxDOT, so we'll know better where we stand with TxDOT as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
We can do that.
I second that motion.
Then moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. It's passed. Thank you very much. We'll return to the agenda, item number 4, presentation and update on the state's first 601 interloop project. We're going to take 4 and 5 together. Number 5, consider and take appropriate action with respect to the defeasance of approximately $6.6 million of Camino Real Regional Mobility Authority pass-through toll transportation revenue bonds for SPUR 601, Series 2008. Mr. Tejas.
Okay, thank you. Raymond Tejas again. So as you know, we have an item for the potential redemption of bonds for the State SPUR 601 project. So what I thought I'd do, because we have a few newer board members and for the benefit of the public, I thought I would take this board through the history of the project itself, and that's under item 4. And under item 5, I've asked Mr. Wayne Placide from First Southwest, who serves as our financial advisor, to come forward and present the proposed redemption of bonds. So that would be item 5, I believe. So if I could ask IT to pull up this presentation, we'll go through the history of the State SPUR 601 project. So we're going to talk about the project details, the project timeline, and pass-through financing in particular, which will lead into Mr. Placide's presentation to you. So project details, this project was a 7.4 miles. It was all new construction. There was no roadway there before, and it was all necessitated by the base realignment and closure activities that Fort Bliss was undergoing at the time. This project was a large project. It included right-of-way acquisitions and relocations, utility relocations, new direct connectors at US 54, new overpasses, new city streets, and additional access points for Fort Bliss. So a really integral facility for Fort Bliss and the expansion that was about to get underway at that time. The total project cost for this spur was $368,172,000. That included a little over $55 million that was considered direct pay, and that was cash that was provided to the developer directly by TxDOT, the El Paso International Airport, and some other sources. The remaining $312 million was funded by TxDOT through the pass-through financing, and that amount, $312 million, is actually the funds that are coming through the RMA, and that's what we're going to talk about here in a little more detail here in a second. This is the project. So you notice on the far right-hand side, you've got Purple Heart. That's Loop 375. So it basically connected Loop 375 on the far east side to US 54 to the west, and added some additional improvements to Walter Jones and Global Reach. Very important project for the airport as well. The timeline: in August of 2007, the pass-through toll agreement was executed. Now, this is an important note because the RMA was just being formed at the time. So what happened with this particular project is that a private developer actually provided what's called an unsolicited bid to TxDOT. So what they were doing was essentially telling TxDOT, we know you need this roadway, we also know you don't have the money to pay for this roadway today. So the developer proposed to TxDOT that it would take out debt and it would do all the construction for this particular project. At the conclusion of it, then, TxDOT would pay back that developer over a period of time for the project expenses, and that's the way that works, and that's in essence a pass-through toll project. So that was an unsolicited bid from a private developer to TxDOT. They agreed and executed the agreement in August of 2007. At this time, the RMA had just been created. The board members were being added at that time. A groundbreaking event for the project between the developer and TxDOT was held in October of 2007. But by January of 2008, the Regional Mobility Authority had been established and the board was put together, and we began in late 2007 discussions between TxDOT, the developer, and the RMA for the RMA to step in and serve as essentially the conduit bond issuer. So the idea was, rather than the private developer going out and issuing debt, which is very expensive for a private developer, the RMA as a public entity went out and issued that debt and saved the entire project a great deal of funds. By doing that, and that's the way that was structured, was through the January 14, 2008 First Amendment to the pass-through toll agreement, which added the RMA to the project as the bond issuer. By February, the following month, then the RMA issued $233 million in bonds for the project. This is an interesting note. By December of that year, the RMA received the bond deal of the year, so it was a really well-received issuance. By March, the facility had been renamed Liberty Expressway. In January of 2011, substantial completion was achieved. That means all the roadways were open for intended use, but there were obviously some punch list items and that sort of thing, some additional work that had to be done, but the roadways were open by January of 2011. April of 2011, we held a ribbon-cutting event and final acceptance, meaning everything was complete on the project by August 30th, 2011. So pass-through financing, I talked a little bit about that. Again, the point of pass-through financing is that the developer completes the entire project for the state and then is reimbursed by TxDOT over a period of time using an agreed-upon formula, which is based on the number of vehicles that are actually using the roadway. So what that means is every time a vehicle under 20 feet uses the roadway, uses State Spur 601, the RMA gets 25 cents. When a vehicle uses and this is per mile, when a vehicle uses the roadway that is in excess of 20 feet, then the RMA receives 85 cents. And we use those revenues to pay down the debt, the bonds that we issued for $230 million. So again, the intent, we talked a little bit about this, the point of this is to expedite projects through an innovative funding approach with state reimbursement made as it becomes available. So we talked a little bit about that. Again, $233,355,000 in bonds were issued by the RMA. $312,450,000 will be reimbursed by TxDOT through this pass-through toll structure to the RMA. Again, 25 cents for vehicles under 20 feet, 85 cents for vehicles over 20 feet. What we've also done, though, to make sure that we can make all debt service payments on time and in full, is that we structured in the agreement minimums and maximums that are due from TxDOT to the RMA. So if the easiest way to say this is every January and every July, the RMA receives a minimum of $15,650,000. That's above the minimum debt service that is due each 6 months. But we have the ability to generate, to actually receive a payment up to $17,500,000. And what drives that actual payment is how many vehicles are using that roadway. So using that 25 cents and the 85 cents, you count up all the vehicles using the roadway on a per mile basis, and that actual actual number. If it's lower than $15,650,000, then we get that minimum amount. If it's higher than $15.6 million but lower than $17.5, then we get the actual amount. And then, of course, if it's higher than $17,500,000, then we would receive the maximum of $17.5. To date, unfortunately, we've been under the minimum, so each 6-month period we receive the $15.65 million payment from TxDOT. In addition to that, I would mention that during each 6-month period, the Regional Mobility Authority also receives a payment for administration of this project, and we receive 0.01% of the then outstanding principal amount of bonds. So currently, if I remember correctly, I want to say it's $12,000, $13,000, $14,000, somewhere in that range, based on how much outstanding principal we have, and Mr. Placide can speak to that. So that is, of course, a sliding scale. So that reduces as we reduce the outstanding principal amount. So that's what I have for you on the project itself. I'm going to ask Mr. Placide to come up and speak to you about the proposed redemption. And he's also going to speak a little bit about prior redemptions and a little bit more on the financial side. So, Mr. Placide.
Thank you, Mr. Tails. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Wayne Placide. I'm with First Southwest Company. We serve as financial advisor to the authority. I'm a managing director at the firm, and we were actually involved in the 2008 financing as well. If I could get you to turn your attention to slide 3. This gives you the overview of the original debt as it was structured for the project. As was mentioned earlier, the total amount of debt was $233,355,000. That was the amount that was originally issued. And we built in that debt the ability to prepay or redeem bonds prior to maturity. And that's shown at the bottom. Maturities in 18 through 20, we had the ability to retire those or redeem them by in year 2018. And maturities for 21 and in year 2022, we have the ability to start redeeming those in 2011. The next slide shows you what we've done to date in terms of redemption. Today we've had 5 redemptions, and we've redeemed a total of $32,195,000 in bonds. We actually have completely redeemed the 2022 maturity. That maturity has been completely redeemed. The next slide show you where we are today relative to what the outstanding debt is relative to this issue. So we currently, principal outstanding is $121,540,000, and that's what remained. Again, I mentioned the 2022 maturity has been completely redeemed. So the redemptions have worked well for you in terms of reducing the debt, and also it's going to allow you to retire the debt prior to the scheduled maturity, which was 2022. So today, what we're asking you to do, and again, the surplus money from was mentioned earlier by Mr. Tejas, the $15,560,000 that you receive every 6 months. The surplus money after you make your debt service payment can be used to prepay or redeem bonds, and that's what we're doing. We're making use of that money, and we've done it before. And where the proposal is that we make another redemption. This one for $6,600,000 would be done on July 25th, and on page 7. I show you kind of the sources and uses of funds. $6,008,000 will be used to total funds available. $6.6 million to redeem. We also have to pay the accrued interest on that, particularly on those bonds up until July 25th. There's legal fees involved, and then the excess remaining will be about $67,000. So what we're proposing is that authorization to go forward with another redemption in the amount of $6.6 million, and that redemption would take place on July 25th. We'll be glad to answer any questions regarding this. Thank you.
If there are no questions, then the recommendation would be a motion to approve the resolution that's included in your backup that would authorize this redemption.
Can we turn the motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item 5 is approved. Item number 6, discussion and action on board resolutions to authorize the executive director to take all actions necessary to implement the following change orders to the construction contract with CMD. CMD endeavors for the Mission Ridge Boulevard Extension Project. A, change order number 4, addition of a butterfly valve, and B, change order number 5, addition of a traffic signal controller. Mr. Tejas.
Okay, so today we have 2 additional change orders for the Mission Ridge project, as was read into the record. Specifically, item 6A deals with change order number 4, and this is for the addition of a butterfly valve at the request of the El Paso Water Utilities. And as by way of background, if you recall, when we entered into the construction contract agreement with CMD Endeavors, we had a base bid and we had an ad alternate bid. That ad alternate, I should say, the base bid was for all of the work that we needed under the 2013 Comprehensive Mobility Plan program that we agreed that we entered into with the County of El Paso. That was the base bid. The ad alternate was certain water utility work that the El Paso Water Utility actually asked us to roll into the project as well. They are funding that 100%, but it is additional work that while we're in the area, it makes a lot of sense for us to complete for them. So change order number 4 then, while CMD was doing work on ad alternate activities, they went to shut off one of the valves and realized that that valve was frozen. And the water utility asked them to replace that valve, and that's what you see before you today. The water utility is providing the valve, and CMD is providing the labor required for the installation of that valve. This is, again, part of the water utilities funds, and I would mention, too, the interlocal agreement that we have with the water utility provided a certain amount of funds for the completion of this project, and those funds cover this. There was a contingency added in that agreement, so we don't need to go back to the water utility for additional funds. Again, requested and approved by the water utility and funded by the water utility as well. So that is item 6A, change order number 4. The total amount, I should mention, is $25,158 for that work. Item 6B then is also on Mission Ridge. This one deals with a traffic signal controller, and unfortunately this one was a designer oversight. There was a traffic signal controller. Really, when you look at the traffic, when you are looking at a traffic signal, there is a controller in there which is really the brains of the operation. It controls when the lights turn, the timing, and all that sort of thing. That was inadvertently omitted from the design, so we're adding it back in here. This is a county-requested and county-approved use of the vehicle registration fee funds. And I would mention that with our agreement with the county, there were excess funds, a contingency fund really, that covers this as well. So we do not require an amendment with the RMA and county interlocal on this one either. Total amount for the inclusion of the traffic signal controller is $32,000. Again, reviewed, approved, and requested by the county of El Paso. So subject to your questions, I would ask for approval of both items.
Any questions for Mr. Chase? Open for a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So items 6A and B have been approved. Item number 7, discussion and action on a board resolution authorizing the executive director to execute supplemental work authorization number 1 with CEA Engineering for the East Lake Phase 2 project for additional traffic signal design services. Mr. Mr. Case.
Yes, ma'am. So this one actually comes about because this relates to a discussion we had at the last board meeting. As you'll recall, the original plan was for Eastlake Phase 1 to be designed and constructed before Eastlake Phase 2. However, we've since swapped Eastlake 1 and 2, so Eastlake Phase 2 is going first. That necessitates the installation of a temporary traffic control, traffic signal at the intersection of Darrington and Eastlake. So this would have been resolved to have Eastlake 1 been done prior to Eastlake 2. However, since we switched it, we require this additional item. So we've asked, and this is actually again, okayed by the county, reviewed and approved by the county, and requested by the county for use of VRF funds to pay for this additional design work. So we are amending our design agreement with CEA Engineering Group for the addition of $11,902.24 for the addition of this temporary traffic signal. So I mentioned also...
Our agreement with the county.
Pardon?
It's still covered by our agreement with the El Paso County City.
That's right. So no amendment is necessary between us on the agreement that we have for the funding. So money is available, and the county has approved it.
Any questions? No? Entertain a motion to approve item
Moved.
7.
Second.
Been moved and approved. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 8, discussion and action on a request for CRRMA membership on the board and or committees of the El Paso Metropolitan Planning Organization. As the board recalls, we had tabled this from our last meeting because Ms. Inert was not available, and she had asked to have this put on the agenda, I think, in March for our, maybe in April for our May meeting. I spoke with Ms. Hinier, and she was not able to participate in today's meeting. And what we would like to have the board consider is to take this item to the governance committee for review and discussion to determine how to move forward on asking or recommending that the RMA be part of the MPO put on the board. And it also makes sense because based on our audit, we do have some governance issues that we have to work on and some bylaws that we have to revisit. And so Ms. Inert agreed that that would be a good solution. She also sits on that governance committee. Joe Fernandez chairs it along with, I think, Mr. Parker. So if it's okay with the board, if we proceed that way, I would entertain a motion to approve that, to take this to the governance committee.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 8 has been approved. Item number 9A, discussion and action on the executive director's report. A, construction advertisements issued for the Rojas Drive and Eastlake Phase 2 projects. Mr. Tess.
I'll be very brief.
Item 9A then deals, it's really just a notice item for you all. We have issued the invitations to bid for the Eastlake Phase 2 project and also the Rojas Drive. Just to tie up loose ends, as you may recall, item 7 actually asks the engineering firm to make revisions to those plans. So since the plans have been put out on the street, we will issue an addendum on this particular one. And it's just to put you at ease, the issuance of addenda are very common in these types of plans. So we had planned on doing one or more anyway. But either way, Eastlake Phase 2 is on the street, as is Rojas Drive, and we've seen healthy response, so I'm happy to report that.
And the deadline is July 28th?
Yes, ma'am. The deadline is July 28th for receipt of bids. So the intention is that I would come back to you in the August board meeting with low bids in hand with a request for approval, We would also bring the interlocals between the CRRMA and the county of El Paso that would provide us with access for the construction funds based on the bid amounts with a certain contingency added. And then we would also have work authorizations to bring our general engineering consultant on board to do the oversight of those construction activities. So that's what you'll see in August, assuming everything moves smoothly with these two projects. Now, what I committed at the last board meeting when we all authorized the issuance of the invitations to bid for the various CMP projects is that I will continue, if we issue additional advertisements between now and next month, I'll bring that to you next month and provide those details to you then.
Excellent, thank you. Any other business? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn today's meeting.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 10:14 on June 8th. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Good meeting, Madam Chair.
Yeah, see how we did.